Mabuhay from the Philippines as we greet, salute, and thank humanitarians throughout the world. August 19, declared by the United Nations, to honor those who help alleviate the suffering of people throughout the world in most difficult circumstances, particularly now during this pandemic aggravated by climate change catastrophes and armed conflict. People are losing their lives, their livelihood. There must be compassion, there must be concern, there must be support so that they can continue with a dignified life. We think of everybody, the vulnerable, the refugees, the victims of violence, those who are afflicted with COVID and all kinds of illness, and the degradation of our environment that is causing so much depression and destruction and death. So we are offering this webinar. We in the EARTHSAVERS, founded by the late Senator, honored as UNESCO Artist for Peace, together with the Philippine Center of the International Theatre Institute and the Social Change Network of ITI. I am Cecile Guidote Alvarez, your host, so that together we can draw from the perspective and appeal of the United Nations through the Secretary General Guterres, through the UNRC and the office that is coordinating for humanitarian affairs in the Philippines, as well as the messages of concern from our legislative leaders like Senator Richard Gordon, Chairman of the Social Justice Committee, but also heading the Philippine Red Cross, Congressman Edgar Chato from Bohol, chairing the Committee on Climate Change in the House, as well as the Secretary of the Presidential Communications Operations Office, Martin Andanar, and the point of view from civil society is being given by Mr. Ike Señeres, who is president of the Alliance of Civil Society, and former Senator Joey Lina, who heads the Philippine Center of the International Theatre Institute and convener of CALL, the Call for Alliance for Life and the Law of the Sea. We begin, of course, by first to join the global challenge for climate change, climate emergency action in solidarity with the people who need it most. Check hashtag the human race, World Humanitarian Day, and let us all collectively show our compassion, our concern, and provide the alleviation of suffering of our own people in the Philippines and throughout the world. Let us listen to the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres.
This year, 2020, has been a year like no other. Conflict, climate change, and COVID-19 have created the greatest humanitarian challenge since the Second World War. The number of people at risk of starvation has doubled. Hundreds of millions of children are out of school. levels of extreme poverty have risen for the first time in 22 years, and the humanitarian system again proved its worth in 2020, delivering food, medicines, shelter, education, and other essentials to tens of millions of people. But the crisis is far from over. Humanitarian aid budgets face dire shortfalls as the impact of the global pandemic continues to worsen. Today, we launched the 2021 Global Humanitarian Overview, our most comprehensive assessment of humanitarian needs around the world. We must mobilize to support those at greatest risk in these unprecedented times. We need $35 billion to get life-saving aid to 160 million of the most vulnerable people. And we must also continue to address the root causes driving humanitarian needs, starting with conflict. I urge all parties to conflict and those with influence over them to support my call for a global ceasefire by the end of 2020. I thank all donors who generously support global humanitarian efforts. Together, we must mobilize resources and stand in solidarity with people in their darkest hour of need. Thank you.
Narinig po natin ang madamdaming pakiusap ng United Nations Secretary General para pakinggan ng lahat ng mga leaders sa buong mundo ang kailangang gampanan sa darating na United Nations Conference of the Parties. Kailangan po ang emergency action. Kung hindi, magugunaw ang mundo. Mawawasak na naman ang buhay. At ang pananaw naman, the perspective from the United Nations Resident Coordinator in the Philippines and the Chief of OCHA, the Office for Coordinating Humanitarian Affairs, Senor Gustavo Gonzalez.
Today we commemorate World Humanitarian Day and we remind the world that we are caught in a climate emergency. The last 6 years have been the hottest on record, and the number of tropical cyclones globally was above average in 2020. And we particularly know this impact in the Philippines. We are confronted to a number of paradoxes that have to be addressed, and very soon. On one side, we have all the evidence that we are doing something wrong with our planet, but the pace of our actions to revert the situation is still very, very slow. And young people are pushing their elders to do what is right. Another paradox is that those that have contributed least to the global climate emergency, they are, however, the most affected by this climate emergency. Millions of people are already losing their homes, their livelihoods, and their lives. And you know that the Philippines is ranked the second most at-risk country in terms of potential impact of climate change. Half of the most destructive storms on the planet since 2000, they have hit the Philippines. More than 1,000 lives are lost every year, with typhoons and other tropical weather shocks accounting for 74% of the fatalities, 62% of the total damages, and 70% of agricultural damage. So we need a green planet, but the world is on red alert. And understanding gender disparities and the special needs of persons with disabilities is crucial in climate change mitigations and adaptation, as well as considering how extreme weather events threaten children's lives. So, today's World Humanitarian Day highlights the immediate human cost of the climate crisis to compel world leaders at the UN Climate Change Conference in November to take meaningful climate action for the world's most vulnerable people. This year, the Philippines will be hosting the world's first anticipatory action pilot for cyclones, with the support of the UN Central Emergency Response Facility. Thanks to this investment, we will be working very closely with the government of the Philippines, development partners, the humanitarian community, and the private sector in developing anticipatory action to better respond to natural disaster. And we are proud of such opportunity which is part of the race against the climate crisis, where we cannot leave anyone behind. And you have the opportunity to be part of the human race. And now, just join us.
Sana po pakinggan natin ang pagsumamo na magkaisa po tayong lahat for emergency climate action para higit na mabigyan ng proteksyon ang mga marginalized, the vulnerable, ang mga mahihirap. Kaya nga po, magandang okasyon ang August 19. Kinikilala po natin si Manuel Quezon dito sa ating bansa na pinakita niya ang kanyang puso para sa mahihirap, for the victims of the Holocaust, that he opened the Philippines for refugees, the Jewish refugees of Auschwitz. Kaya it is a very good gesture as well to say that the Philippines, as we were open to Vietnamese refugees, we are also open now to possible refugees from Afghanistan. Pinapakita po ang ating puso para sa mga higit na nangangailangan, yung nasa mahirap na sitwasyon. Tayo rin, we have refugees from climate catastrophes and even armed conflict sa Mindanao. Sana po nakahanda tayong tumulong. Nakikita natin ang ayuda na binibigay, lalo na the very volunteer community pantry support so that we mitigate hunger and poverty. And now, let us listen to our humanitarian statesman from the legislative sector. Senator Richard Gordon chairs not only the Blue Ribbon Committee, the Social Justice Committee, but also chairs the Philippine Red Cross. This is recognized by the United Nations, the Red Cross, as one of the major humanitarian organizations in the world. And we know, it is our experience, meron pong nangangailangan ng dugo, tumatawag po tayo kay Senator Richard Gordon at mabilis ang pagtulong para sagipin ang buhay. At ngayon, we have to also applaud, salute, and assist our frontliners. Sila po, they are our soldiers on the ground, defending our lives, our health, our security, peace in our homes. Senator Richard Gordon, Chairman of the Philippine Red Cross.
Good day. Mabuhay ka, Cecil. At nais ko kayo i-congratulate na sinaselebrate nyo ang World Humanitarian Day. Napakahalaga ng the World Humanitarian. Ibig sabihin yan isang talagang sa sanlibutan, meron tayong values na iangat ang dignidad ng taong bayan, hindi lang sa ekonomiya, hindi lang sa yaman, ngunit ihango sa kahirapan, lalo na yung mga vulnerable, at bigyan ng tinatawag natin kumpiyansa na magkaroon ng dignidad at hindi palaasa at hindi maging palasisi. So today, we just celebrated International Humanitarian Day the other day sa Red Cross. Pero nyo yun, nagawa ng isang batang-batang si Henry Dunant na magkaroon ng patakaran ng humanitarian values kahit na may giyera. Pagka nagyera ka na at ikaw ay na-wounded o nabihag ka na, hindi ka na pwedeng pahirapan at dapat bigyan ka ng tulong para sa ganoon hindi mawawala ang dignidad mo at hindi ka pwedeng alipustahin. Pero kadalasan, nababiolate yan. That is why World Humanitarian Day must be celebrated every day. Dapat tinuturo natin sa mga kabataan yan. And I congratulate you, Cecil, for your continuous devotion to such values that can only make our country proud and certainly a principled country, especially in this day and age when there is hardly any respect even for communication. There's a lot of fake news, a lot of lies, a lot of cursing, a lot of, para bang inuuna natin yung instant gratification. There's only one gratification. That is when you respect your fellow man and you love your fellow man. Happy World Humanitarian Day. I salute you, Cecil. I salute all the humanitarians of the world. Kailangan manalo tayo sa kasamaan. At magtatagumpay tayo kung lahat tayo ay isang buhat. Tanggalin natin ang ating tungkulin, ang ating dignidad, at ang ating determination. At tandaan nyo, pagka ikaw yung humanitarian, ikaw ay leader. At ang leader, hinahango mo ang mahirap sa kaluluwa. Ang mahirap na nawawalan ng pag-asa. Hinahango mo siya doon para magkaroon siya ng lakas ng loob at tulungan niya ang sarili at tumulong siya sa kapwa. Kapagkat sa bawat tulong niya sa kapwa, lumalakas ang pagka-humanitarian niya at ang nangyayari, lumalakas ang values ng bayan at tayo ay mahahango sa lahat ng hamon ng panahon. Maraming salamat sa inyong serbisyo. Ito po si Dick Gordon, bumabati sa inyo at palagi niyong kaagapay sa lahat ng hamon ng panahon. God bless you. Mabuhay kayo. Cecil at lahat ng kasama mo.
Thank you, Senator Gordon. And I'm sure everybody has heard your call for unity so that we can overcome difficulties and provide the care for those who are most in need. In the House of Representatives, Congressman Edgar Chato of Bohol, Chairman of the Committee on Climate Change, provides the perspective of action in Congress and provides as well the model of decarbonization that is being undertaken in Bohol. Something that can inspire other provinces to take the same path for alternative clean energy and combat climate change.
An earth-friendly greeting to all of us. I would like to thank UNESCO Artists for Peace Director Cecil Guidote Alvarez of the EARTHSAVERS Dream Center for inviting me to give a message for this year's celebration of the United Nations World Humanitarian Day. This year's theme highlights the immediate human cost of a climate crisis, which is very timely considering that climate emergency, not just climate change, is upon us now. It is a common notion that climate change is the cause of extreme weather conditions and the zoonotic diseases that we are experiencing now. In fact, last year, our country was visited by 7 typhoons and 1 super typhoon between 11 October to 11 November 2020. In addition, the Philippines is hit by an average of 20 typhoons a year. Zoonotic diseases, or diseases believed to have jumped from an animal host to a human host, has continued to plague us even before the COVID-19 pandemic. In the light of these calamities, it is therefore very timely that on 25 November 2020, the Philippine House of Representatives, under the leadership of Speaker Lord Alan J. Q. Velasco, adopted House Resolution 1377 as House Resolution 123 and declared an environmental and climate emergency, the first climate emergency declaration of national scope in the country, by mobilizing a whole-of-nation approach to the climate crisis. The declaration ensures that the Philippines is doing its part to mitigate the crisis. Ongoing slow onset impacts like sea level rise and droughts, as well as extreme weather events. More recently, on 25 June 2021, the House Committee on Climate Change, together with Rice Watch Action Network and Greenpeace Philippines, held a virtual ceremonial turnover and presentation of the Bohol Climate Emergency Roadmap LGUs may use this roadmap as basis for their own declaration of climate emergency and as blueprint for their local climate action plans. This Friday, the committee will be tackling the proposed bill on enhancing climate change resiliency and adaptability. In the coming days, the House Committee on Climate Change will also push for the approval of pieces of legislation that will also address the climate crisis. These proposed bills are the Integrated Coastal Management and the National Coastal Greenbelt Program. Allow me also to take this opportunity to share with you the climate change initiatives of the province of Bohol, which is anchored on the vision of the province as a prime ecocultural tourism destination with high regard for environmental preservation. These are institutionalization of anti-coal ordinance, creation of a Bohol Energy Development Advisory Group to formulate policies and guidance in power management and development, pioneer province in the passage of the Bohol Environment Code and subsequent revision to adopt climate change mitigation and disaster resiliency. Bohol is among the first provinces to pass the Bohol Organic Agriculture Code. Multi-stakeholder and public-private sector collaboration in the vital initiatives for environmental protection, the LGU's clustering method for the establishment and operation of the Albur Sanitary Landfill, and the country's first modern green airport via the Bohol Panglao International Airport using solar power, wastewater treatment, and green architecture. The House Declaration of Environmental and Climate Emergency is only the beginning. We are one with the world in the fight to avert the climate crisis. Good day to everyone, and thank you.
It is good that under the leadership of Congress and the Senate, under Senate President Tito Soto, provides legislative support to fulfill our obligation to cut carbon, to move towards renewable, clean energy for the health of our people. And I am so glad to have witnessed, together with then Climate Change Commissioner Gerson Alvarez, UNESCO Asia Pacific Director Hubert Gishen in Bohol, the inclusive policy of development of then Governor Chato and his promotion of arts heritage-based sustainable tourism. And now, let us hear, as we are also during this week observing Peace and Freedom Week, beginning with the commemoration of the martyrdom of Ninoy Aquino and concluding in August with the National Heroes Day. This is a call for heroism, and we salute the heroism of our frontliners, saving lives as they themselves endanger their own lives and their families. We will now hear from Secretary Martin Andanar. The Andanar family, particularly his father, was part of the freedom fighters to restore democracy. And the call to respond to the climate crisis demands heroism from all of us, and to be a humanitarian in spirit, in action, and in our ways of providing support. Very simple ways, like what has been seen as we undergo the lockdown because of COVID. Let us hear from Secretary Martin Andanar, the head of the Presidential Communications Operations Office. It is a good thing that the president has signed the Paris Accord.
It seems not enough that the world reels from a virus pandemic, with an earthquake in Haiti, with Afghanistan in conflict, and now with a climate crisis imploding. Humanitarian systems continue to deliver food, medicines, shelter, and other basic necessities to the most vulnerable communities of people affected by disasters. Like the terrible earthquake in Haiti and the floods in various Asian cities, individual countries are seriously dealing with the containment and eradication of the COVID-19 virus and its variants. And the seeming suddenness of America's very recent withdrawal from Afghanistan is now being confronted by the United Nations Security Council for whatever formula of support could be possibly given to the severely distressed Afghan people. We face each other now through this webinar meeting on World Humanitarian Day to remember August 19, 2003, in honor of the humanitarian chief in Iraq, Sergio Vieira de Mello, and the 21 members of his staff who were killed in the Canal Hotel bombing in Baghdad. 18 years have passed, and the time is now to once again call on the world leaders to act on the climate crisis, a foreboding eventuality that is fast despoiling our environment and ecological order. The inconvenient truth that former Vice President Al Gore warned us about is rapidly ruining our planet. This global humanitarian overview comes at the right hour to act in solidarity, as it is indeed the darkest period of global need. The COVID-19 virus has vaccines and medical interventions for saving lives. The devastations caused by floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, storm surges, and other natural calamities can be mitigated. People can be helped, and property can be rebuilt. But what about climate change? A phrase that includes global warming, ice caps melting, corals bleaching, the slow flow of the waters from the Himalayan glaciers on the Tibetan plateau to the Yangtze, the Mekong, the Yellow, the Salween, the Brahmaputra rivers, and the toxic emissions from the coal, garbage, factories, vehicles, cargo ships, and more destructive elements that directly cause climate change. Addressing the root causes is the urgent call of the UN Secretary General Guterres. And so we must, else we face a future that could crumble as we speak. Our government's commitment takes the form of a new executive department for disaster resiliency, together with the Department of Natural Resources, which continues to take charge of our integrated ecological and environmental systems, emphasizing the proper conservation of our rich natural resources. This planet is our only home, and the changes we cause to its climate should not lead to its destruction. All the best to this global humanitarian overview, and may all pledges be realized. Thank you, and God bless our planet Earth.
Ngayon naman po, pakinggan natin ang komentaryo ng mga leaders in civil society. In order for humanitarian action to be very effective, kailangan po, we need coordination, partnership of public-private coordination or cooperation. And we have some prime examples. Mr. Ike Señeres is a well-known broadcast journalist and has been a champion of social action. As a matter of fact, tagapangulo po siya ng Social Action Council and has been putting together an alliance of civil society networks and organizations. And because of this deep experience, long experience in working with civil society, with various sectors, in encouraging collaboration, caring, and concern, this has been a very important factor in his serving now in government as a member of the board of directors of PCSO, which talaga naman pong masasabi natin, ito ang PCSO, ang humanitarian arm of government. And so let's listen to Mr. Ike Señeres from his deep experience in civil society programs and into governance for humanitarian affairs at PCSO. Ike.
Good evening, Ma'am Cecil. Thank you for this time. Well, I think so that our audience will understand better what is PCSO. There are only two sides to PCSO. That's the fundraising side and the charity side. No? But since I am aware that this program is being broadcasted within the United Nations circles, no, our role in the SDG is number 3. We are healthcare, no. Although by implication, we have also livelihood programs in order to help the poor, no. But our primary mission is actually healthcare, no. And we are required by law to provide funding to the Universal Healthcare Law. About 40% of our charity fund goes to the funding for the Universal Healthcare Law. And we're also a contributor to the Malasakit program of Senator Bongo. No? So every day, that's what we do. We raise money and we spend money for charity. But, you know, Ma'am Cecil, I found out that no matter how much money we have, it's lacking because there are so many poor people who need help. And our money is only designed for certain purposes, for instance, hospitalization. And yet our people, they need more than that. There are many people who are requiring money for outpatient, no? But because of our limited resources, we cannot give outpatient expenditures, no? And there are many people asking us for wheelchair, for dentures, for eyeglasses, for crutches. We cannot provide because our money is allocated for hospitalization. And that's the reason why I thought of organizing the Social Action Council of the Philippines. And my plan, ma'am, is to use social media because that's also my business. I build mobile apps and websites and I engage people in social networking. I think by using social networking, we can mobilize civil society organizations, non-government organizations, and even the CSR, no? I think almost 100% of big corporations now, they have their own corporate social responsibility program, but CSR. That is the good news. But the bad news is there is a lack of coordination between the companies that are wanting to help and the NGOs that are already actively working, no, to help the poor. The other good news is there are actually existing laws that would enable corporations to donate to the poor, but it needs to be promoted. No, there are certain tax credits that can be used for livelihood, for healthcare, and that's what I'm working on. So I hope that by putting together the efforts of the government, the civil society, and the churches, there was a time when we have a National Social Action Council. The CBCP was part of it, and even the NCCP was part of it. National Council of Churches of the Philippines was part of it. That's what I want to bring back. We should encourage the participation of the churches. Let's all work together. To me, that's the real bayanihan.
Thank you so much for that inspiring and encouraging plan of yours, which will really enhance the crucial need to care, particularly during this time of pandemic.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Ike Señeres.
Good night. Magandang gabi.
In the Senate, under a restored democracy, Senator Gerson Alvarez had immediately asked or developed a program as chair of environment to help diffuse the ecological time bomb of global warming, foreseeing the climate change catastrophes that can ruin our home and lives of our people. Most of the people said they laughed at him, saying he was scaring people, especially those living in the coastal areas. But another senator, Joey Lina, was a strong ally. And even together, they had convened what we call the Youth Participation for Climate Strike, as well as even convening a tripartite conference to develop a roadmap to pursue good action to fulfill our commitment in the Paris Accord. Former Senator Joey Lina, a distinguished broadcast journalist, tenor, is president of the Philippine Center of the ITI and convener of COL. Let us hear from him.
Today, World Humanitarian Day, we remind ourselves that we are our brothers and sisters' keepers. In the world, especially in developing countries, we are witnesses to the suffering of our fellow human beings from natural or man-made causes. The list is long. Fisherfolks, farmers, indigenous people, uneducated youth, malnourished children, abused women, and many others. Today, we also pay tribute to all humanitarian aid workers who attend to alleviate the suffering of our fellow human beings. Government cannot do the job alone. Civil society organizations, ordinary citizens can do their part in helping those who are in need. As president of the International Theater Institute, Philippines, we are committed to organize more theater events to help raise awareness about the human suffering around us and to encourage citizens to extend their helping hand to help the poor, the marginalized, and the powerless. As convener of the civil society organization called the Citizens Alliance for life and the law of the sea, we shall focus more attention on the plight of fisher folks, especially in the West Philippine Sea, who are now suffering from less fish catch because of incursions by foreign fishermen who overexploit our resources in the West Philippine Sea.
Indeed, respect for the law of the sea and the care of the ocean and protection of its underwater heritage is essential to help mitigate conflict, and cultural diplomacy, we believe, can bridge dialogue. We would like to end this call of the United Nations system led by the UN Secretary General Guterres for all of us to stand in solidarity with the world's most vulnerable people by using these hashtags in your social media. Hashtag the human race, World Humanitarian Day. And let us hear a special song by our handicapable artists, our blind singers, led by Maricor Book and Camille Mercado. It's a prayer song for the marginalized.
Panginoon, di ba't noon nabuhay kang dukha? Pakinggan mo pagsamo ko na may kapansanan. Panginoon, hanggang ngayon ang buhay ko'y hirap. Tulungan mo ang tulad kong mabuhay ng ganap.
This is Cecile Gidote Alvarez on behalf of the Philippine ITI Center, as well as the EARTHSAVERS UNESCO Artists for Peace. We thank you for joining us in celebrating World Humanitarian Day. Please keep safe. God bless us all. Follow health protocols so that we can overcome COVID. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas. Long live the humanitarian leaders of the world.
Magisna ng hiwaga ng umaga. Panginoon, akayin mo mga kapuspalad, samahan mo maralitan, yagit sa lansangan. Panginoon,